Ferrari will get a power boost sometime after Formula One's August break thanks to an engine upgrade that team principal Mattia Binotto has described as a significant step. This will be another step in Ferrari's attempts to claw back its power unit disadvantage and could play a crucial role in its battle for third in the Constructors' Championship with McLaren. But how much ground does Ferrari still have to gain in terms of engine performance? When should we expect the upgrade to be introduced? And isn't there an in-season engine freeze that should make such upgrades impossible? Let us know in the comments how optimistic you are about Ferrari's chances, and if you think this will give it the boost it needs to beat McLaren to third. Before we get on to Ferrari's upgrade, let's address the elephant in the room. Isn't there an in-season engine freeze? Well, the answer to this is yes and no. To understand this, we have to go back to when the COVID-19 pandemic hit Formula One last year. As part of a raft of cost containment measures, a form of engine freeze was introduced. But it's more accurate to call it homologation regulations that lock the specifications at certain times. This is divided into the usual components that make up the power unit: the internal combustion engine itself, turbocharger, MGUH, MGUK, control electronics and energy store, as well as the engine exhaust system, fuel and engine oil. The homologation for each was initially locked when the 2020 season started belatedly last July. Since then, F1 has agreed an engine freeze that starts in 2022 and should run through to the end of 2025. Key to understanding why Ferrari can introduce this upgrade during the season is that the regulations only state that it's one change of specification allowed per year for most components. This table, which is a composite created by the race based on what appears in the 2021 and 2022 technical regulations, lays it all out for you. So last year, most components were frozen. Within that, the MGUK, energy store and control electronics were allowed to have one change across 2020 and 21. For everything else, there's just one change allowed in 2021. But while most made their changes at the start of the year, the one change for 2021 can be homologated and introduced at any point between the end of last season and the final race of this year. As Ferrari is still using some components homologated in 2020, it still has the freedom to introduce the genuine 2021 specification. Next year, one new homologation of all the elements is permitted, with the deadline of March the 1st for the majority. But the MGUK, energy store and control electronics have a later freeze date of September 1st. From then on, everything is frozen until the end of 2025, save for any permitted changes made for reasons of reliability, safety and cost control, if approved by the FIA. Since being forced to modify the way it operated its power unit extensively for 2020 as part of its clandestine agreement with the FIA following unproven suspicions it was running its engine illegally, Ferrari has been playing catch-up on engine power. Of its 65 brake horsepower deficit to Mercedes in 2020, it's now reckoned to have clawed back in the vicinity of 40 brake horsepower of that, which puts it on par with the Renault engine that powers the Alpine. Ferrari's average deficit to pole position this season has been 0.7 seconds. According to Binotto, that splits 60-40 between the power unit and the chassis. Combined with its excellent slow corner performance, this has allowed Ferrari to score more than double its 2020 points tally after 11 races, and Charles Leclerc to take pole position on the streets of Monaco and Baku. Ferrari has made significant improvements in terms of the way it uses its tyres after hitting its nadir in the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard. There, the Ferrari SF21 worked the front tyres too hard and finished outside the points despite Leclerc and Carlos Sainz qualifying 5th and 7th respectively. It's not yet clear when the engine upgrades will be introduced, although we know they won't be deployed before the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, which is the third race after the summer break. Drivers are limited to 3 sets of the main power unit components for the season and just 2 energy stores and control electronics. Exhausts are now also regulated, with 8 permitted for the season. Sainz introduced his third internal combustion engine, turbocharger and MGUH on Saturday in Hungary, while Leclerc sustained damage to the engine that will necessitate the introduction of at least some new components at Spa after the break. Whether Ferrari will be hit with penalties when the upgrade is introduced will depend on exactly what changes, although both potentially still have the third MG UK available, and a new MG UK could confer a significant power advantage. Ferrari has not confirmed which components remain to be upgraded, and there were specification changes to some parts of the engine at the start of the year, meaning not everything can be changed. This means it's difficult to say what the gains will be, but with 10 brake horsepower worth around a tenth of a second per lap as a rule of thumb, and more around the most power-sensitive circuits, it will help Ferrari to be more competitive. It's also a key step in Ferrari's race against time to develop its power unit package to be as strong as possible in time for the engine freeze in 2022 that will cover the following 3 seasons. Ferrari has already opted to commit to the more innovative of 2 ambitious engine projects it had for 2022 that it was working on in parallel. It will not introduce the split-turbo concept used by Mercedes, Honda and, as of 2022, Renault, but instead is taking an aggressive approach to the combustion technology it uses. There will also be intercooler and energy recovery systems changes that are showing very promising results. The engines will be frozen in 2 parts, with the majority locked in at the start of March ahead of the season, and the MG UK, Energy Store and Control Electronics locked at the start of September. If Ferrari doesn't have an engine that is on par with the best its opposition has to offer by then, it's likely to carry that weakness through 2023, 2024 and 2025 as well. The battle for third in the Constructors' Championship between Ferrari and McLaren has raged since the start of the season, with the 2 teams currently level on points. Ferrari is technically ahead on countback, given its best result is Leclerc's second place behind Lewis Hamilton at the British Grand Prix. The battle between the 2 has ebbed and flowed, but despite AlphaTauri being close on average pace, McLaren and Ferrari have pulled well clear in the points battle. Ferrari had lagged behind McLaren in the points battle until the Hungarian Grand Prix, where Lando Norris's retirement after being punted into Max Verstappen by Valtteri Bottas, and Daniel Ricciardo's failure to score in a car carrying damage after being caught up in a first corner incident triggered by Edd Straw. But Sainz's third place evened up the scores. While McLaren has been the more consistent performer, particularly on race days, Ferrari's peaks have generally been higher. Leclerc would likely have won from pole position in Monaco, but for undetected damage caused in his qualifying shunt that meant he could not start, while he only lost the lead with 3 laps remaining in the British Grand Prix when Hamilton passed him. The battle is likely to run to the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, but it's not just about finishing third this year. Both teams are trying to re-emerge as race-winning forces after difficult years, albeit with McLaren having spent far longer in the doldrums, having not won since 2012. Both teams have invested heavily in major infrastructure projects, with Ferrari recently opening its new driver-in-loop simulator and McLaren working on its new wind tunnel, and they have serious aspirations of emerging as title contenders in the coming years. As McLaren has a Mercedes engine deal until at least the end of 2024, it is essential for Ferrari that it at least improves enough to have parity on power to avoid falling behind its old rival. The remaining 2021 upgrades are going to be very important in showing the necessary progress. So what do you think? Can Ferrari improve its power unit package enough to catch Mercedes and Honda by the end of 2022? And who will prevail in the battle for third this year? And if you enjoyed our look at Ferrari's imminent upgrades, don't forget to like and subscribe.